The barrier around Earth died at exactly 9:47 Galactic Standard Time. For 4,000 years, it had stood invisible and perfect, turning away every probe and ship that came close. Now it was gone, and the rest of the galaxy could finally see what had been hidden for so long. Captain stood on the bridge of the Eternal Watch, staring at the incoming ships on his display. There were hundreds of them, all bearing the symbols of the Galactic Coalition. He had known this day would come eventually. Every member of Earth's defense force had trained for it their entire lives. "Sir, they're hailing us," said his communications officer. Nodded slowly, opened the channel. The face that appeared on the screen was not human. Ambassador had blue skin, 4 eyes, and a mouth that moved in strange ways when he spoke. But his words came through clear enough in the translation. "Unknown vessel, this is Ambassador of the Galactic Coalition. We come in peace to make first contact with your species. Please respond." Could see the surprise on the aliens' faces when his image appeared. They had expected to find primitives, perhaps, people who still lived in caves or had just discovered fire. Instead, they found a warship with weapons that made their sensors scream warnings. "This is Captain of the Earth Defense Force. Ambassador, your arrival was expected. Please hold your position while we arrange proper protocols." The confusion on his face was obvious even across species. "Expected, but your world has been isolated behind an impenetrable barrier for. How could you have expected us?" Allowed himself a small smile. "We've been watching, Ambassador. The barrier kept you out, but it didn't keep us blind." It was not entirely true, but it was not entirely false either. Down on Earth's surface, Dr. Park received the alert on her tablet. The Coalition had arrived. She had been preparing for this moment for 15 years, ever since she had been chosen as the keeper of Earth's historical records. Everything that could be told to outsiders was in her head. Everything that must remain secret was locked there even. She walked through the halls of the Global Archive, past rows of sealed chambers that held the truth. Her assistant, a young woman named Song, waited by the entrance. "They're here," said quietly. "It's really happening." Nodded. "Get the sanitized records ready. Nothing from the deep vaults, nothing about the war, nothing about why we built the barrier." "Do you think they'll accept that?" asked. "They'll have questions." "Of course they will," replied. "And we'll answer what we can. The rest stays buried." In the command center beneath Seoul, Admiral watched the diplomatic dance unfold on multiple screens. The Coalition fleet had stopped at Earth's outer defense perimeter, as requested. They were being cautious now after seeing Earth's technology. Good. Caution meant time, and time meant control. "Analysis?" he asked his tactical officer. "Their weapons are standard plasma-based systems, energy shields, nothing that suggests they know about quantum disruption or dimensional warfare. They're advanced, but not in the ways that matter." Felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. The Coalition was powerful, certainly. Their fleet could destroy unprepared worlds, but Earth had not been unprepared for 4,000 years. "What about their scanning technology?" he asked. "They can't see the hangars. The quantum fold camouflage is holding. As far as they know, the Eternal Watch is our only capital ship." Nodded. "Let them think that. Let them believe Earth was just one world with one ship and some satellites. The truth would come out eventually, but not today." The negotiations moved to Earth's orbital station 3 days later, stood beside as the Coalition delegation arrived. There were 7 species represented, each stranger than the last. Led them, his diplomatic robes flowing despite the lack of wind. "Your station is impressive," said as they walked through the corridors. "We detected no such structures from beyond the barrier." "We've had a long time to build," replied carefully. 4,000 years of isolation teaches a species to be self-sufficient." They entered the conference chamber, where refreshments from both Earth and Coalition worlds waited. The aliens examined everything with obvious curiosity. One of them, a crystalline being called Al, spoke through a translation device. "We have many questions," Al said. "Your isolation is unprecedented. Natural phenomena do not create such perfect barriers. It was artificial, yes." "Yes," admitted. There was no point in denying the obvious. "Then why?" asked. "Why cut yourselves off from the galaxy, from trade, from culture, from knowledge?" Met his four eyes without flinching. "We had our reasons, reasons that are difficult to explain without proper context." "Try," said, and there was an edge to his voice now. "The Coalition must know if you pose a threat, a species that hides for raises concerns." Stepped forward. "With respect, Ambassador, we could ask the same of you. We've monitored your broadcasts for centuries. The Coalition has fought wars, conquered species, and destroyed worlds. Should we not be concerned about your arrival?" The room went silent. Several of the aliens shifted uncomfortably. His face showed something that might have been anger or might have been respect. "Fair enough," the ambassador said finally. "Then let us establish trust slowly. Share what you can, keep your secrets for now. But know this, the Coalition has laws. Species that join us must prove they are not a danger to others." "We understand," said. "We welcome the opportunity to join the galactic community, but some knowledge takes time to share." The negotiations continued for weeks. Earth shared technological data that seemed impressive but revealed nothing critical. They opened their cities to visitors and showed off their culture. The Coalition delegates were fascinated by human art, music, and food. They marveled at Earth's diversity and the unity of its global government. But they also noticed strange things. Earth's quantum mechanics were far more advanced than their own. Their biological research focused heavily on disease prevention and consciousness studies. Their military bases, what few were visible, showed signs of preparing for a very specific type of warfare. And there were the monuments. In every major city stood memorial walls covered in names. Millions of names. When asked, humans would only say they commemorated the old war and refused to elaborate. Song ran the calculations 3 times before she believed them. The barrier had not failed randomly. It had been deliberately shut down from the inside, following a specific sequence that only Earth's quantum network could generate. Someone had decided it was time to open the door. She brought her findings to late one night. "Why now?" asked. "Why let them in after 4,000 years?" Looked at the data, then at the young physicist. "Because," she said quietly, "our sensors detected something 6 months ago, something coming from the dark space beyond the rim. We ran the signature through our old databases." And pressed. "And we got a match," said. "We need allies now. The time for hiding is over." She didn't say what the match was. She didn't need to. Had high enough clearance to know what Earth had been hiding from all these years, what they had fought and defeated ago, what had cost them billions of lives and nearly their entire civilization. The Devourers were returning. And this time, Earth could not face them alone. 6 months passed since first contact, and the Coalition's patience was wearing thin. Ambassador sat in his office on Earth, reviewing the latest reports with growing frustration. Every answer led to more questions. Every piece of data revealed another inconsistency. "They're hiding something massive," he told his aide. "I can feel it." Colonel Minu watched the Coalition observers from his position in the Seoul Command Center. They thought they were being subtle, taking readings and running scans during their diplomatic visits. They had no idea that every sensor sweep was being tracked, recorded, and analyzed. "They're getting bolder," his second-in-command noted. "Yesterday they tried to scan the northern defense sector." Minu smiled coldly. "Let them look. They'll see exactly what we want them to see. Standard defense grids, conventional weapons, nothing that reveals the real installations." Deep beneath the Arctic ice, 200 warships sat in quantum-fold hangars, completely invisible to normal detection. Minu had personally overseen their construction over the past 20 years. They represented Earth's true military might, and the Coalition had no idea they existed. On the Coalition capital, world of Prime, moved through the crowded marketplace like any other tourist. Her cover as a human cultural was perfect. No one suspected that she spent her nights breaking into secure databases and stealing classified information. What she found troubled her deeply. The Coalition was afraid, not of Earth, not yet, but of something else. Something they called the Devourers in their oldest records. The files were encrypted and fragmentary, but pieced together enough to understand. 5,000 years ago, the Devourers had appeared from dark space. They consumed entire civilizations, leaving nothing behind. Billions died. The Coalition had fought them desperately, and then suddenly the Devourers vanished. No one knew why or where they went. The dates matched. The Devourers disappeared right around the time Earth erected its barrier. Sent her report through a quantum-encrypted channel that night. Admiral needed to know that the Coalition was connecting the dots. Dr. Lee stood in his laboratory, examining the genetic samples they had shared with Coalition scientists. It had been a calculated risk, but necessary to establish trust. The samples showed human DNA with certain modifications, all of which could be explained as natural evolution. What they didn't show were the deeper changes, the modifications that allowed humans to resist mental influence, the enhancements that made their pattern recognition superior to any AI, the specific genetic markers that made them immune to consciousness-based attacks. His assistant knocked on the door. "Doctor, the Coalition are requesting another meeting. They have questions about our neural structure." Sighed, of course they did. Human brains were different in ways that were hard to hide completely. "Tell them I'll meet them tomorrow, and prepare the standard explanations. Nothing about the modifications." "They're getting suspicious," his assistant warned. "Let them be suspicious," replied. "Suspicion is not proof." Sora I am sat across from in yet another diplomatic meeting. The ambassador's 4 eyes studied her with obvious frustration. "Your culture honors warriors," said. "Your monuments, your ceremonies, all celebrate military sacrifice. Yet you claim Earth has been at peace for 4,000 years. Sora kept her face calm. "We honor our history, Ambassador. The old war was long ago, but we don't forget those who died." "The old war," repeated. "You always use that phrase but never explain it. Who did you fight? When? Why?" "It was an internal conflict," Sora lied smoothly. "Civil war before our unification. The details are painful. We prefer not to discuss them with outsiders." Leaned forward. "Miss I have been a diplomat for 70 years. I know when someone is lying to me. Not about the war being painful, that much is clearly true, but about it being civil. No civil war requires the kind of biological warfare countermeasures I see in your medical facilities. No internal conflict explains why every human child is taught dimensional physics alongside basic mathematics." Sora said nothing. Sometimes silence was better than more lies. "What are you afraid of?" asked quietly. "What are you preparing for?" "Survival," Sora answered, and that at least was the truth. "We prepare for survival." The Coalition High Council met in emergency session 3 months later. Evidence had mounted to the point where it could no longer be ignored. Earth was not what it seemed. "Their orbital defenses are at least a century more advanced than they claim," one counselor reported. "We detected quantum-fold energy signatures near their moon. They're hiding something there." "Their genetic modifications are not natural," another added. "Our are certain of this. Humans were engineered, possibly ago, for a specific purpose." "But what purpose?" someone asked. The room fell silent until an elderly counselor spoke. She was from a species that had survived the devourer attacks 5,000 years ago. Her people had long memories. "I know what they are," she said softly. Or rather, I know what they were made to be. Look at their modifications: enhanced pattern recognition, resistance to mental influence, superior threat assessment. These are not traits for peace. These are traits for fighting something that attacks the mind. The Devourers said, understanding dawning. They were made to fight the Devourers. Or they fought them, the elderly counselor replied. And that is why they hid, not from us, from whatever might call the Devourers back. Admiral receives warning that the coalition had figured out part of the truth. He called an emergency meeting of Earth's Defense Council. They know we're connected to the Devourers, he told the assembled officers. They don't know the full story yet, but they will soon. We need to decide how much to tell them. Nothing, Minu said firmly. The moment they know what we did, what we are, they'll either worship us or fear us. Neither helps our position. They already fear us, Doctor countered. She had been called in as the historical expert. Better they fear us with understanding than without. At least then they might trust us when the time comes. When what time comes? Another officer asked. Looked at who pulled up the sensor data on the main display. We've been tracking anomalies in deep space for 8 months now. Dimensional rifts forming and closing. Energy signatures that match our old records. They're preliminary signs. Signs of what? Someone asked, though most already knew the answer. The Devourers are coming back, said quietly. Our models suggest first contact in 18 to 24 months, maybe less. The room erupted in discussion. Some argued for immediate disclosure. Others insisted on maintaining secrecy as long as possible. Let them argue for several minutes before calling for silence. We tell them, he decided. Not everything, not yet, but enough. We reveal that we fought the Devourers and won. We offer our help to prepare the coalition, and we pray they accept it before it's too late. 2 weeks later, stood before a select group of coalition leaders in a secure chamber. Stood beside her, along with a historian who specialized in the silent war. What we are about to tell you cannot leave this room, began. Not yet, not until your people are ready. She activated the holographic display. Images appeared showing Earth as it had been 5,000 years ago. Green and beautiful, with cities covering every continent. Billions of people living in peace. Then the images changed. Cities burning, the sky turning black, bodies piled in the streets. The Devourers came to Earth 5,300 years ago, said. We had no warning, no preparation. Within days, a third of our population was dead. Within months, half. Continued the story. They didn't just kill, they consumed. They attacked our minds, trying to turn us into extensions of their hive. Most species they encountered simply fell. Their consciousness absorbed, their bodies used as tools. But humans resisted, said. We don't know why. Something in our genetics, something we didn't even know was there. We could feel them trying to take control, but they couldn't break through. The coalition leaders sat in stunned silence as the images showed humanity's desperate war. Weapons that tore at dimensional fabric. Ships that operated on quantum principles no one else had mastered. Soldiers fighting enemies that could phase through walls and attack from multiple dimensions at once. The war lasted 300 years, said. It cost us everything. 7 billion dead. Our biosphere devastated. Our civilization nearly destroyed. But we won. You killed them? Asked. We did more than kill them, replied. We learned how they worked, how they thought, how they existed across dimensions, and we built weapons specifically designed to destroy them utterly. Soul weapons, said. That's what we called them, weapons that could attack consciousness itself. Another hologram appeared, showing the final battle. Human ships unleashing energies that made the Devourers scream. The hive mind fragmenting, breaking apart, dying. When it was over, we made a choice, said. We could tell the galaxy what we had done. Become protectors, perhaps, or we could hide. Make sure that if anything ever tried to call the Devourers back, the signal couldn't reach beyond Earth. The barrier realized. The barrier confirmed. We've been watching you for 4,000 years through it, watching the galaxy live in peace while we stood guard in silence. The elderly counselor who had guessed the truth spoke carefully. Why tell us now? Why lower the barrier? And exchanged glances. This was the hardest part. Because, said, pulling up the sensor data, 6 months before the barrier fell, we detected something. Something coming from dark space, moving toward the galactic rim. The display showed energy signatures and dimensional readings. The coalition scientists went pale as they recognized the patterns. They're coming back, said simply, and this time Earth cannot face them alone. The Coalition High Council met in full session for the first time in 50 years. Representatives from 400 species filled the Grand Chamber on Prime, all demanding answers. Rumors had spread despite the secrecy protocols. Everyone knew something massive had been discovered about Earth. Ambassador stood at the central podium, his 4 eyes scanning the assembled delegates. The information we are about to share will change your understanding of galactic history. What we thought we knew about the Devourers was incomplete. Doctor walked onto the floor beside him. Behind her came Ryu and a dozen other humans carrying data tablets. The chamber fell silent as activated the main holographic display. 5,000 years ago, the galaxy faced extinction, began. The entity you call the Devourers consumed 37 civilizations in the span of 2 centuries. You fought them. You lost billions. Then they vanished, and you assumed they had simply moved on to another galaxy. She paused, letting that sink in. They didn't move on. They were destroyed completely, utterly, and it was humanity that destroyed them. The chamber erupted in chaos. Voices rose in disbelief, anger, and fear, called for order repeatedly before the noise subsided enough for it to continue. I know this is difficult to believe, she said, so I will show you. The hologram shifted, displaying Earth's subterranean archives. Miles of tunnels carved into bedrock, lined with data storage units that hummed with quantum processors. Everything is here. Every battle, every casualty, every weapon we developed, every secret we kept, and today we share it all. Ryu stepped forward. He was old, even by Earth's extended standards. His family had guarded the deepest archives for 3 generations. What you must understand first is what the Devourers were, not just warriors or conquerors. They were a consciousness plague. The display showed a Devourer in full detail. The thing was massive, its body shifting between physical and dimensional states. Multiple limbs extended from a central mass that seemed to exist in several realities at once. They attacked minds before bodies, explained. Most species fell within hours of first contact. Their consciousness absorbed into the hive mind. Their bodies became extensions of the Devourers. This is how they grew so quickly. But humans were different, added. She pulled up genetic data on the display. We discovered something in our DNA, something we didn't put there. An ancient modification, possibly millions of years old. It made us immune to consciousness attacks. A counselor from the Vex species spoke up. You're saying humans were engineered. By whom? We don't know, admitted. We found evidence of an ancient precursor race in our genetic code. They're long gone now, but they left us with a gift, the ability to resist mental domination. Took over again. When the Devourers reached Earth, they expected an easy victory. Instead, they found a species they couldn't control. We could fight back. More than that, we could study them while they tried to break into our minds. The hologram showed the early battles. Humans fighting desperately with conventional weapons that barely scratched the Devourers. Cities falling. Millions dying. But humans learning with each encounter. We realized they operated on dimensional principles, continued. They existed partially in normal space and partially in quantum dimensions. Standard weapons could hurt them but not kill them. They would simply phase away and regenerate. So we adapted, General said, joining the presentation. He commanded Earth's hidden fleet, and his presence was a clear message about how serious this was. We developed weapons that could attack across dimensions, quantum disruptors, dimensional shredders, consciousness bombs. The coalition delegates shifted uncomfortably as described the arsenal. These were weapons beyond anything they possessed, weapons that seemed almost magical in their capabilities. The sole weapons were the breakthrough, Shin added. She was Earth's leading quantum warfare specialist, young but brilliant. We found a way to attack consciousness itself, not just the brain or body, but the fundamental awareness that makes something alive. The hologram showed the weapons in action, beams of twisted energy that made the devourers writhe and scream, ships firing quantum torpedoes that erased chunks of the hive mind, ground forces using dimensional rifles that could hit enemies in multiple realities at once. The war lasted 3 centuries, said quietly. 7 billion humans died. That's almost half our species. Every continent our atmosphere was poisoned, our oceans boiled in places, but we kept fighting. The display shifted to show the final battle. Earth's fleet, battered but determined, surrounding a massive devourer hive structure in deep space. Thousands of human ships firing everything they had. We traced them to their source, explained. A dimensional nexus where they bred and gathered. We hit it with every soul weapon we had. The resulting dimensional collapse destroyed the entire hive mind at once. The hologram showed the explosion. It wasn't fire or plasma. It was reality itself tearing apart, consciousness screaming into the void, and then nothing. Just empty space where the devourers had been. When it was over, we faced a choice, said. Tell the galaxy what we'd done or hide. We chose to hide. Why? Demanded a counselor. You could have been heroes, saviors of the galaxy. Because we learned something terrible, answered. He looked older suddenly, burdened by knowledge. The devourers had a connection to something else, something in dark space, beyond the galactic rim. We detected signals going out from them before we destroyed the hive, signals we couldn't decode or stop. We feared that by destroying them, we had sent a message, added. A message that might bring something worse. So we built the barrier, not just to protect ourselves, but to prevent any signals from Earth reaching out into the void. Brought up new data. The barrier was a quantum construct that folded space around Earth. It didn't just hide us visually. It prevented any dimensional signals from entering or leaving. We became a ghost to the universe. For 4,000 years we watched, said. We monitored the galaxy through the barrier. We saw you rebuild. We saw new civilizations rise. We saw peace return. And we stood guard in silence, ready to fight again if the devourers ever returned. Spoke carefully. You said you lowered the barrier because they are returning. How do you know? Song stepped forward with her quantum sensor data. We detected the first anomalies 18 months ago. Dimensional rifts forming in deep space, energy signatures matching our old records of devourer activity. At first, we hoped it was coincidence, natural phenomena. But it wasn't, said grimly. 3 months ago, we detected a test probe, a small devourer scout about the size of a shuttle. It appeared at the galactic rim, scanned for life, then vanished back into dark space. The chamber went deathly quiet. The nightmare that had haunted coalition history for 5 was returning. They're different now, continued. The energy signatures are similar but evolved. They've adapted somehow, grown, changed. Whatever we destroyed 5,000 years ago wasn't the whole species. It was just the vanguard. How long do we have? A counselor asked. 12 to 18 months, estimated. Maybe less if they move faster than expected. They're gathering at the rim, building strength. When they come, it will be in massive numbers. Stepped forward again. This is why we revealed ourselves, why we're sharing everything. Earth can fight them. Our immunity still works. Our weapons still function, but we can't defend the entire galaxy alone. What do you propose? Asked. Took a deep breath. Full military alliance. We share our sole weapon technology with trusted coalition species. We train your soldiers in dimensional warfare. We coordinate defense strategies across all systems. And we prepare for the largest battle in galactic history. You're asking us to trust you, a counselor said, to give you access to our military, to let you teach us weapons that could destroy consciousness itself. How do we know you won't turn those weapons on us? It was who answered, his old voice steady. Because we already had 4,000 years to do that if we wanted. We chose isolation instead. We chose to bear the burden alone rather than risk harming innocents. Does that sound like a species that wants to conquer you? Spoke for the first time. We're not asking you to trust blindly. Send observers to Earth. Inspect our facilities, review our history. You'll see we're telling the truth, but do it quickly. Time is running out. The debates lasted 3 days. Some species wanted to reject Earth's help, fearing it was a trick. Others argued for immediate alliance. The older species, those who remembered the Devourers, urged acceptance. They had seen the terror before. They knew what was coming. In the end, the vote was unanimous. The coalition would ally with Earth. But as the delegates filed out, making plans for the coming war, pulled aside. There's something I didn't mention in the briefing, something I found in the latest sensor data. What? Asked. Showed her the readings on her tablet. The Devourer probe didn't just scan randomly. It was searching for something specific, and when it found it, it transmitted coordinates back to dark space. Coordinates to what? Asked, though she was afraid she knew the answer. To Earth, said quietly. They know exactly where we are, and I think they're coming for us first. Stared at the data, feeling cold despite the warm chamber. Humanity had hidden for 4, but the Devourers had found them anyway. The war wasn't coming to the galaxy in a year. It was coming to Earth much sooner than that. And this time the Devourers knew exactly what they were facing. They had adapted, they had prepared, they had learned. The real question wasn't if Earth could fight them. It was whether humanity's ancient weapons and immunity would be enough against an enemy that had evolved specifically to overcome them. Looked at the assembled humans around her. All of them warriors and scientists, guardians who had stood watch for. They would fight. That was never in question. But whether they would win was something no one could answer. Not yet. The first attack came 8 months early. Captain was drinking coffee in his quarters aboard the Eternal Watch when the alarm screamed to life. He dropped the cup and ran to the bridge, arriving just as his crew brought up the tactical display. Reports, he ordered. Dimensional rifts opening at the galactic rim, his sensor officer called out. Count is 3. No, 715. Sir, they're everywhere. The display showed the entire outer edge of the galaxy lighting up with red markers. Each one represented a rift where the Devourers were pouring through from dark space. Felt his blood run cold. This wasn't a probe. This was an invasion. Get me Admiral now. The Admiral's face appeared on screen within seconds. Behind him, the sole command center was chaos. I see them, Captain. Full fleet activation is. Get the Eternal Watch to defensive position Alpha 7. Sir, what about the coalition fleets? They're mobilizing, said grimly. But they're not ready. Most of their ships don't even have dimensional shielding yet. This is going to be a massacre unless we buy them time. Nodded, understood, moving to intercept. Across the galaxy, coalition forces scrambled to respond. Admiral, who had taken command of the Joint Coalition Defense Fleet, watched in horror as his sensors showed the scale of the invasion. Hundreds of Devourer ships, each one massive and twisted, emerged from the rifts. All ships prepare for engagement, he ordered. His voice was steady despite the fear he felt. Remember your training. Quantum disruption fields at maximum. Don't let them phase through your shields. The first coalition ship to make contact was a cruiser from the Vex species. It opened fire with plasma cannons, scoring direct hits on a Devourer vessel. The creature screamed, its body rippling with damage. Then it phased sideways into a different dimension and disappeared. 3 seconds later, it reappeared inside the cruiser's shields and tore the ship apart from within. "They're adapting faster than expected," its tactical officer reported. "Our weapons are hitting them, but they're learning to avoid the damage." "Then we adapt faster," snapped. "All ships activate dimensional anchors. If they try to phase, lock them in normal space." It helped, but not enough. The Devourers had learned new tricks in 5,000 years. Some could split into multiple smaller forms. Others released clouds of consciousness plague that tried to take control of ship crews. A few even generated their own dimensional rifts, creating portals to move reinforcements directly into battle. The coalition line began to collapse. Then Earth's hidden fleet arrived. Watched as 200 warships emerged from quantum-fold hangars across the solar system. Ships that had been hidden for decades, built with technology the Coalition didn't know existed. The Eternal Watch led them forward, its weapons charging with energies that made space itself ripple. "All ships," broadcast, "full activation of soul weapons, target the hive nodes first, break their coordination." The Earth fleet opened fire, and the Devourers learned why humanity had won the first war. Soul weapons didn't just damage matter. They attacked consciousness, ripping apart the hive mind connections that let the Devourers coordinate. When a soul torpedo hit a Devourer ship, the creature didn't just die. It screamed across dimensional barriers as its very awareness was shredded. "Target the big one," ordered, pointing to a massive Devourer that seemed to be coordinating the others. "All quantum disruptors fire." The Eternal Watch and 5 other ships fired simultaneously. The dimensional disruption beams hit the Devourer from multiple angles, preventing it from phasing away. Then the soul weapon struck home. The creature convulsed, its body tearing itself apart as its consciousness fragmented. When it died, a dozen smaller Devourers nearby seemed to lose direction, their hive connection severed. "It's working," his tactical officer reported. "Coalition forces are rallying. They're following our targeting priorities." On the surface of a coalition colony world called 7, Colonel Menu led his ground forces into battle. The Devourers had sent landing troops, creatures that could phase through walls and attack from multiple dimensions at once. Regular soldiers couldn't fight them effectively. But Menu's troops weren't regular soldiers. They were human, trained specifically for this kind of warfare. "Dimensional scanners active," Menu ordered. "Mark their phase signatures, don't let them hide." The humans moved through the colony city with practiced efficiency. When a Devourer phased through a wall, trying to flank them, they simply tracked its dimensional signature and fired quantum rifles that hit it in both realities at once. The creature died before it could fully materialize. "They're trying to reach the civilian shelters," one of his lieutenants reported. 3 groups moving through the underground tunnels. "Intercept and eliminate," Menu ordered. "No mercy, these things don't take prisoners." His troops deployed dimensional mines in the tunnels. When the Devourers tried to phase through them, the mines detonated, creating localized dimensional collapses that trapped the creatures in normal space. Human soldiers gunned them down with concentrated fire. The colonists, huddled in their shelters, watched through security cameras as human soldiers did what their own military couldn't. They fought monsters from dark space without fear, using weapons that seemed like magic. Back in space, the battle raged for hours. The Coalition was learning fast, adapting their tactics based on what they saw Earth's forces doing. But the Devourers were learning too. A new type appeared, larger and more heavily armored. Shin, monitoring from Earth's Quantum Warfare Command Center, recognized it immediately from old records. "They're bringing in heavy assault forms," she called out to Admiral. "These things can tank multiple soul weapon hits. We need to concentrate fire." "You hearing this?" asked. "Confirmed," replied from the bridge of the Eternal Watch. "I see them. They're heading for flagship, redirecting fleet elements to intercept." But the Devourers were faster. 3 of the heavy assault forms phased directly onto the Coalition flagship's hull, tearing through the armor with limbs that existed in multiple dimensions. Alarms screamed as atmosphere vented into space. "This is Admiral," came the call over the emergency channel. "We're being boarded. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 9, requesting immediate." The transmission cut off. "Didn't hesitate. Take us in, ramming speed." "Sir," his helmsman asked. "You heard me. Activate reinforced shields and ram that flagship. We're going to scrape those things off like barnacles." The Eternal Watch accelerated, its massive bulk building momentum. Coalition ships scattered as the human warship charged straight at the flagship. At the last second, ordered the helmsman to rotate, bringing the ship's armored flank against the flagship's hull where the Devourers clung. The impact was tremendous. The Eternal Watch's shields held, but the force was enough to crush 2 of the Devourers against the flagship's hull. The third phased away just in time, only to be hit by a quantum disruptor from another Earth ship. "Boarding teams deploy," ordered. "Secure the flagship and get out of there." Minu's troops might have been on the ground, but had his own special forces. 20 human soldiers in dimensional armor phased onto the Coalition flagship, their weapons ready. They found crew desperately fighting Devourer boarding parties in the corridors. The humans changed that fight immediately. Their dimensional scanners showed them exactly where the Devourers were trying to phase, and their quantum rifles made sure the creatures stayed in normal space long enough to die. Within 15 minutes, the flagship was secure. Nursing an injured arm, stared at the human soldiers in awe. "You fight like you've done this 1,000 times." "We have, sir," the team leader replied. "Just not in this century. Now let's get you back to commanding this battle." The fighting continued across multiple systems. Earth's forces were everywhere, plugging gaps in the Coalition lines, showing other species how to fight dimensional enemies. Slowly, the tide began to turn. But not fast enough. A Coalition analysis showed that for every Devourer they killed, 2 more came through the rifts. The enemy was probing defenses, testing responses, learning. Dr. Lee, working frantically in his biology lab, made a disturbing discovery. He had been analyzing Devourer remains from the battle, comparing them to ancient samples in Earth's archives. "They've changed," he told Admiral over a secure channel. "Their cellular structure is different, more resilient, and their consciousness pattern shows signs of individual intelligence mixed with the hive mind." "What does that mean?" asked. "It means they learned from their last defeat," replied grimly. "They're not just a single hive mind anymore. They're something between individual and collective, harder to disrupt with soul weapons, smarter, more adaptable." "Can we still beat them?" Hesitated. "I don't know. Our immunity still works. Our weapons still hurt them. But this isn't the enemy we fought 5,000 years ago. This is something that evolved specifically to fight us." As if to prove his point, the sensors detected something new emerging from the rifts. A ship larger than anything seen before, with an energy signature that made every alarm on Earth scream warnings. "What is that?" asked, staring at the readings. Ran the signature through her databases and went pale. "It's a Hive Lord. We only fought 3 of these in the last war. It took everything we had to kill them." "How many do they have this time?" asked. Checked the long-range scans and her hands started shaking. "Multiple contacts, at least 7, maybe more behind them." Saw it too from the Eternal Watch. The massive Devourer ship was coordinating the others, making them more efficient, more deadly. Where it appeared, Coalition forces crumbled. All Earth ships, he broadcast. New priority target. That Hive Lord dies now or we lose this war. But even as he said it, wondered if they had enough. The Devourers had returned stronger, smarter, and more numerous than before. And somewhere in dark space, sensors showed more rifts opening, more ships coming through, an endless tide of consciousness predators adapted specifically to overcome humanity's defenses. The war had just begun, and Earth was already being pushed to its limits. The question wasn't whether they could win anymore. It was whether they could survive long enough to find a way to win. The war had been raging for 6 months, and the galaxy was losing. Captain stood on the bridge of the Eternal Watch, now bearing scars from a dozen battles. Around him, his crew worked with grim determination. They had won fights. They had saved systems. But for every victory, the Devourers claimed 2 more worlds. Incoming message from Earth Command, his communications officer announced. Admiral's face appeared, older and more tired than had ever seen him. Captain, we've traced the dimensional rifts to their source. Doctor and have been working on this since the war started. His face appeared beside the Admiral. The rifts aren't natural. Someone is generating them artificially. We tracked the quantum signatures back to a location in the Void Sector. The Void Sector, asked, that was unexplored space far from any inhabited systems. Who would be out there? That's the problem, said heavily. We sent a stealth probe. The rift generators are located on a station, a coalition station. The bridge went silent, felt anger rising in his chest. Someone in the coalition is creating the rifts. They're bringing the Devourers here deliberately. A rogue faction, his voice cut in. The coalition admiral had been included in the communication. The species. We investigated after your probe found the station. The leadership believed they could control the Devourers, use them as weapons against political enemies. Fools spat. The Devourers can't be controlled. We proved that 5,000 years ago. They didn't know, replied. Our records of the first Devourer War were incomplete. The thought they had found a way to weaponize them. By the time they realized their mistake, it was too late. Then we shut down the generators, said. Cut off their reinforcements. It's not that simple, his voice came through. The generators are protected by a dimensional fortress. We call them Hive Nexus points. The Devourers built these structures to anchor themselves to normal space. They're massive, heavily defended, and exist in multiple dimensions at once. Doctor appeared on the screen. We fought 3 Nexus fortresses in the last war. Each one cost us hundreds of ships and thousands of lives to destroy. Intelligence suggests there are 5 of them now, all connected to the rift generators. So we need to destroy all 5 at once, said, before they can adapt and reinforce each other. Exactly, confirmed. We're coordinating a simultaneous assault. 5 battle groups, each led by one of our capital ships. Coalition forces will support, but the primary strike teams need to be human. Only our troops can effectively fight inside the Nexus structures. What about the soul weapons? Asked. Can we just bombard them from orbit? Shook her head. The Nexus points exist in quantum flux. Normal bombardment will damage them but not destroy them. Someone has to go inside and plant dimensional charges at the core anchors. It's the only way to collapse them completely. Understood immediately. This was a suicide mission, multiple suicide missions. How many people are we talking about? Per Nexus, 20 soldiers minimum to reach the core and plant the charges, Colonel Menu said, joining the conversation. But with the defenses they have, we should send 50 per team to ensure success. 250 people total. They won't be able to get out in time, said quietly. The dimensional collapse will kill everyone still inside. We know, Menu replied. His face was calm, accepting. We've already asked for volunteers. We had over 10,000 applications in the first hour. Felt his throat tighten. When do we launch? 72 hours, said. Use that time to prepare your ship and crew. Captain, you'll be leading Battle Group 1. Your target is the primary nexus in the Void sector. It's the largest and most heavily defended. After the briefing ended, walked through the ship, looking at his crew. They were exhausted, wounded, but still ready to fight. He wondered how many of them would survive the next 72 hours. Doctor spent those 3 days doing something she had avoided for 4,000 years. She opened the deepest vault in Earth's archives and brought out the records of those who had volunteered for similar missions in the last war. Thousands of names. Thousands of people who had walked into dimensional collapses knowing they wouldn't return. Why do they do it? Sorayam asked, standing beside her in the vault. The diplomat had volunteered to go with one of the strike teams despite having no military training. Because someone has to, replied simply. That's what it means to be human. We bear burdens so others don't have to. The leaders who had started this catastrophe were arrested by coalition forces. Too late to matter. The damage was done. The devourers were here and they wouldn't leave willingly. But the scientists provided one crucial piece of information. The rift generators had a weakness. If the nexus points were all destroyed simultaneously, the generators would overload and create a chain reaction. The dimensional rifts would collapse, sealing the devourers out of normal space. There was just one problem. The dimensional charges needed to be anchored by conscious minds. People would have to stay with the charges, focusing their thoughts to create a quantum lock. Without that lock, the devourers could simply phase away from the explosion. It meant that everyone who went into a nexus wouldn't just die in the collapse. They would have to actively hold themselves there, maintaining the anchor even as reality tore itself apart around them. Figured out how to make it work. She designed neural interfaces that would link the volunteers together, creating a network of minds strong enough to hold the dimensional charges in place. With 50 people linked together, the anchor will be unbreakable, she explained. The charges will detonate, the nexus will collapse, and the dimensional rifts will seal. And the people, someone asked. Look down. Their consciousness will scatter across dimensions, not death exactly, but not anything we can bring back either. The day of the assault arrived. 5 battle groups assembled, each one a mix of Earth and coalition ships, stood before his strike team of 50 soldiers. They were young and old, men and women, all human, all volunteers. I won't lie to you, he said. This is a one-way trip, but what we do today will save billions of lives. Every species in the galaxy will continue to exist because of your sacrifice. History will remember you. Earth will remember you. And I promise you, we will make sure your families know that you died as heroes. The soldiers saluted. Not one of them looked afraid. They had trained for this their entire lives. They were humanity's guardians, and this was their purpose. The battle groups entered the Void sector together, their sensors locked on the 5 Nexus coordinates. Immediately, the Devourers swarmed to defend their fortresses. The space battle was brutal. Coalition ships provided covering fire while Earth vessels pushed through toward the Nexus points. Watched 3 coalition cruisers die protecting his approach. He made note of their names. Their sacrifice would be honored alongside his own. Approaching Nexus 1, his helmsman reported. Dimensional instability increasing. We're entering the quantum flux zone. The Eternal Watch shuddered as reality became flexible around them. The Nexus appeared on their screens, a massive structure that hurt to look at. It existed in at least 7 dimensions simultaneously, its geometry impossible to follow. Boarding teams launch, ordered. 50 assault pods fired from the ship, phasing through the Nexus's outer defenses. Was in the lead pod, his quantum rifle ready. They materialized inside the fortress and immediately came under attack. Devourers swarmed them from every direction. These weren't the mindless drones they'd fought in space. These were defenders, smart and coordinated. They knew humans were the biggest threat. But Minyu had trained these soldiers well. They moved as a unit, their dimensional scanners showing them where enemies would phase in before they appeared. Quantum rifles fired in perfect coordination. Soul grenades disrupted the hive mind connections. Step by step, they advanced toward the core. Killed his 20th devourer and checked his team's status. They had lost 8 soldiers already, but they were still moving forward. The other battle groups reported similar progress. The plan was working. They reached the core after an hour of fighting. It was a chamber where multiple dimensions intersected, creating a stable anchor point. The dimensional charges needed to be placed at 5 specific locations around the chamber. Plant the charges, ordered. Activate the neural links. His soldiers moved to their positions. Each one planted a charge and attached the neural interface to their head. Took his own position, feeling the interface connect to his mind. Suddenly, he could feel the other 41 soldiers still alive. Their thoughts, their determination, their acceptance of what was coming. Across the galaxy, the other 4 battle groups reached their own cores. 400 people total, all linking their minds to hold dimensional charges in place. All teams report ready, the communication came through. Detonation in 60 seconds. Looked at his soldiers. Some were crying, some were smiling, all of them were brave. "It's been an honor serving with you," he said. "The honor was ours, Captain," one of them replied. The countdown hit 0, and 500 dimensional charges detonated simultaneously. Reality screamed. Felt his consciousness expand, stretched across dimensions as the charge activated. He could feel the nexus trying to phase away, trying to escape destruction. But he held it in place. They all did. 400 human minds linked together, refusing to let go. The fortress began to collapse. Dimensional walls crumbled. The quantum flux destabilized. And through it all, the humans held firm. His last thought was of Earth, of the planet that had stood guard for 4, of the people who would live because he and his team chose to die. It was enough. The 5 Nexus fortresses collapsed simultaneously. The dimensional rifts throughout the galaxy sealed shut. The Devourer reinforcements were cut off, trapped in dark space. Without reinforcements, the remaining Devourers in normal space were destroyed within weeks. Coalition forces, now trained by Earth, hunted them down systematically. The war was over. But the cost was terrible. 400 humans had given their consciousness to seal the rifts. Thousands more had died in the fighting. Entire coalition fleets were destroyed. Worlds were. On Earth, monuments were built. The memorial of eternal anchors stood in the center of every major city, listing the names of those who had sealed the rifts. Their families were honored, their sacrifice remembered. Doctor stood before one such monument, reading Captain's name. Beside him were listed all the soldiers who had gone into Nexus 1. None of them had returned. None of them ever would. But because of them, the galaxy survived. The Coalition underwent massive changes after the war. Earth was granted leadership status in military affairs. Soul weapon technology was carefully shared with trusted species. Dimensional warfare became standard training for all Coalition forces. More importantly, the isolation ended. Humanity joined the galactic community not as conquerors or rulers, but as protectors and teachers. Earth's role as silent guardian was finished. Now they would guard openly, alongside allies who understood the cost. General, who survived the war, established the Coalition Defense Academy on Earth. Students from hundreds of species came to learn dimensional warfare from the people who had mastered it. Humans and aliens trained together, preparing for any future threats. Continued her research into quantum physics, working with Coalition scientists to develop better defenses. They built new barrier technologies, not to isolate worlds, but to protect them. Early warning systems were installed at the galactic rim, watching for any signs of the Devourers returning. Colonel Minu retired from active service but trained the next generation of special forces. His students, both human and alien, learned the tactics that had saved the galaxy. They also learned the philosophy behind those tactics, the willingness to sacrifice for others. Worked with the scientists who had originally created the rift generators. Together, they developed technology to permanently seal dimensional weak points, preventing anyone from ever opening rifts to dark space again. It would take decades to deploy across the entire galaxy, but the work had begun. And Doctor, keeper of Earth's secrets, no longer had secrets to keep. The archives were open to coalition scholars. The history of humanity's silent war was shared freely. Future generations would know what had been done and why. 5 years after the war ended, a grand ceremony was held at the coalition capital. Representatives from every species gathered to honor the 400 who had sealed the rifts. A monument was unveiled, showing 400 figures standing together, their hands linked, their faces turned toward the stars. Admiral gave the dedication speech. His 4 eyes were wet with tears as he spoke. These humans taught us what it means to be guardians. They showed us that true strength lies not in weapons, but in the willingness to sacrifice for others. They stood watch in silence for 4,000 years, bearing a burden so we could live in peace. And when the time came, they gave everything to save us all. He paused, looking at the monument. We owe them a debt we can never repay, but we can honor them by remembering, by staying vigilant, by standing together against the darkness. Humanity showed us that no species must face extinction alone. That is the legacy they died to protect. The galaxy would remember. The eternal anchors, they were called. 400 humans who held reality together with nothing but willpower and courage. Their names were taught to children of every species. Their story became legend. And on Earth, in the deepest archive vault, added one final entry to the historical records. It read simply, "For 4,000 years we stood alone. For 6 months we fought together. And in the end we proved that humanity's greatest weapon was never our technology or immunity. It was our willingness to bear any burden, pay any cost, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. This is what it means to be human. This is what it means to be a guardian. May those who come after us never forget." The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed. But one thing remained constant. Earth stood watch still, no longer alone, but always ready, always vigilant. Because some threats never truly die. They only sleep. And when they wake, someone must be there to stand against them. That someone would always be humanity. And now, they would have allies standing beside them. The age of isolation was over. The age of guardianship together had begun.